Okay, we are looking in chapter 11 at dramatic roles, or what we commonly call a drama. Many people believe that drama or dramatic roles are the meat, quote unquote, of acting. In fact, even in one act play, there's this theory that if you were going to be serious and want to advance the state level, you had probably better do a drama because comedies are less likely, although the statistics don't bear that out. That's the common belief, and a lot of people have that belief about dramas in general. We broadly define dramas into three categories: tragedy, social drama, melodrama, and we're going to look at each one of those and see what they have to do with one another and what we can learn about from them. All right, in the next page on preview, where it talks about the elements of drama, it says dramatic productions are categorized in three ways. We have tragedies, social or serious dramas, melodramas. Each type has its own unique characteristics, and each requires its own set of acting skills. Let's start off with the Greek tragedy. Now, this is a test question. Considered to be the highest form of drama, tragedy magnifies the intensity of profound human emotions to tell the story of a person who achieves a sense of nobility by means of unswerving sacrifice and or suffering. Usually, especially in classic Greek tragedy, you have a protagonist who's the main character of the story, the hero, or if it's a woman, a heroine of the story who's the audience going to identify and empathize with. In a tragedy, that person is going to go down in defeat. Of course, we know that the antagonist, can be a person or an opposing force of some sort, will come in conflict with them. And eventually, what makes it a tragedy is this hero, this protagonist, goes down in defeat, usually death, but not before there's some kind of dignity that's achieved in the process. So they may make some kind of sacrifice or something that makes them more than just an average person. And so they become somewhat of a hero. And that's why it becomes a tragedy, because that hero is going to die or must go down in defeat in some way or another. Now, because of the depth of tragedy's emotions, the audience experiences horror, pity, sadness, all of which are followed by a catharsis, which is a relief from that comes from purging your emotions. It's kind of like in real life when you get upset about something and you cry, or you hit something or whatever, and you feel better afterward because you've purged that emotion. That's what a catharsis is when you have that problem. Okay. Also, in Greek tragedies, you have a tragic hero who comes into conflict with the gods. Oftentimes in Greek tragedies, the audience always knew the plot because they're the same basic stories, but they were eager to find out how each particular playwright would handle those particular tragedies. Violence was never actually witnessed on stage in the Greek tragedies. They always had a chorus that would come out and tell you about it, or some kind of messenger that would come and report the violent actions. They never actually demonstrated it on stage. The tragedies of Sophocles, such as Oedipus Rex and Antigone, are perfect examples of classic Greek tragedies. You also had Shakespeare's tragedies. You know Shakespeare, we've heard of him. He was an Elizabethan playwright because he wrote during the time of Queen Elizabeth I. And he ignored the classical tragic form for the most part, but he often focused his tragedies on a protagonist at odds with himself. In other words, with an internal conflict, whether it be some kind of, that person would usually have some kind of tragic flaw, such as hubris, which is excessive pride, or maybe greed or lust or something like that. Shakespeare and his contemporaries often mixed comedy into their tragedies, and music and song and dance were sometimes part of a scene as well. This is a test question, dialogue that was intellectual or meaningful would be presented in iambic pentameter. That's when you have 10 syllables in the line with 5 stresses through the line. So it's like a stress, unstressed, stress, unstressed, stress, unstressed. So that would be intellectual or meaningful, and that's what Shakespeare. That's what's one of the hallmark of Shakespeare's work, is when he had that kind of dialogue or that kind of conversation, it would be presented that way. The uneducated or the foolish often spoke in prose, just everyday way of talking. The tragic universe of Shakespeare's plays often highlights a disrupted life that seeks to regain order within a spiritual context. Hamlet, Macbeth, King Lear are examples of Shakespearean tragedies. Okay? Now, serious drama, also known as social drama, are things that deal with issues that people face today. You have plays by Arthur Miller, like Death of a Salesman and All My Sons, where these people struggle to maintain their dignity while acting in immoral ways. You had a play called Inherit the Wind, and another one called Boy Gets Girl, that explore important contemporary issues. It says all of these dramatists point out the problems people face today without necessarily suggesting solutions to them, and that's important. They didn't suggest solutions to them. Here we have a picture. You know who Liam Neeson is. Liam Neeson in a play called The Crucible by Arthur Miller, and it was written in the 1950s during the time of the Red Scare and McCarthyism. But this play is about the Salem witch trials, but where people were being accused and losing their lives and having their lives destroyed over accusations that were not true. Well, the Red Scare was going on in the 1950s, the same thing. So this was addressing issues that people faced at that particular time in life. Now, in serious and tragic plays, the characters are usually fully drawn individuals who have one dominant trait that the actor must project. Hamlet is indecisive. That means he can't make decisions. Othello is jealous. Anne Sullivan in The Miracle Worker is stubborn and determined. Miracle Worker, that's a play about Helen Keller, who was blind and deaf and couldn't talk, and Anne Sullivan was her teacher in real life, so there's a play about that. The protagonist of just about any tragedy or serious play is in some definable way very impressive. This is the result of not only the character's indomitable spirit, but also because he or she has the courage to stand up against a great obstacle. And it should go without saying that the antagonist must also be strong in order to provide a balance for the protagonist that is strong. Look at the next little thing over here where it talks about building a dramatic character. There are 4 essential elements when it comes to acting in a tragedy or a serious drama. You must convey strong characterization, emotional intensity, simplicity of objective, and motivation. Those are important for you to keep in mind as you prepare to do dramatic characters. All right, using emotion. The intense emotions called for in dramatic roles must be portrayed with utter conviction and sincerity while maintaining the poise necessary to put the play across. To create these emotions, you may need to use emotional recall. This is the process by which you use the memory of emotional incidents from your own past and transfer them to a similar situation your character is in. You must focus on the details of the past event and try to visualize and feel the emotion all over again. Although I don't necessarily agree with that. This is something that a famous acting teacher named Stanislavski taught many, many years ago. He was a Russian director and actor and etc. And he taught this. My personal opinion is you don't have to actually feel those emotions again, but you need to remember how you responded, and you need to think, how am I going to portray that? How did I portray it? So, for instance, if you're in a play and your spouse dies, well, you've probably never been through that in your life, but maybe you've lost a pet. So you can go back and you can think, okay, how did I feel? How did I react? What was my response? And you can make some applications to the play based on that. You don't have to feel those emotions all over again. Some people do that, but I don't think you have to do that. Okay? Another type of drama is a melodrama. Now, this picture here is a picture of a classical character in a melodrama. And let's just look at it. Melodramas are a type of play that focuses more on cliff-hanging action and tugs on the heartstrings than on character development or society's real problems. In a melodrama, the purpose is to create great suspense and excitement in the audience. They were very popular in the United States in the early 1800s and were very popular still until the early 1900s. Nowadays, back in those days, they were very serious and people could be very emotionally wrapped up in them. Nowadays, we usually do them more as a comedy because it's so narrow, so shallow, and it's almost funny the way it's done. A subcategory of melodrama are the gay 90s melodramas, meaning they were written and performed in the 1890s, gay being happy. Those were happy times, supposedly. These plays have exaggerated values of right and wrong. They have such stock types as the mustachioed villain and the sweet, innocent heroine. Though modern audiences find these plays humorous, in their time, such works also aroused tears. So today we look at them and they're kind of funny, but back then they were very serious and people could get very emotionally wrapped up in them. Regional accents. A regional accent is the particular sound of speech of a region. Inexperienced actors are not usually cast in roles for which an accent is necessary, but even actors with plenty of experience can be frustrated by tricky speech patterns associated with particular places. So basically, a regional accent is how a person from a particular region or area talks. Like we have our own regional accent for our part of Texas. If you were from Boston, you would have your own part. If you were from Southern California, you would have your own regional accent, etc. So if you are cast in a role that requires you to speak with an accent of a certain region, you can get a book on the subject, but it would also be good to lessons from someone, or if you can't do that, go on YouTube. There are many videos in there on how you can speak with an accent. Now, here's something that's important and you'll need to know for your test. To do a credible or believable accent, you will need to develop your ear. That means learn how to listen to the sounds they make. Imagine that you've been cast as the Cockney flower girl Eliza Doolittle in Pygmalion by George Bernard Shaw. You might get a videotape of the play or find a tape that includes a lower class English accent. Listen for specific sounds in the accent and think about how they differ from your normal speech. You will need to figure out the phonetic or sound differences so that you can recreate them consistently. And this is a test question. In fact, consistency, in other words, doing it the same way throughout, is the most crucial element when it comes to developing a believable accent. When you perform, it's important to give the suggestion of the accent rather than concerning yourself with making every sound recognizable as being from that place. You have to be understood. So you don't necessarily have to sound exactly the way they do, because some accents may be difficult for everybody to understand. So you want to give the suggestion of it, and you do that by being consistent with certain sounds, and people will pick up on it. Most people are not going to be familiar enough with the accent of the region to really know whether you got it 100% right or not. But again, you want to make sure you're understandable. So that's why you have to just be consistent and don't try to be perfect with it. Okay. Make sure that when you are doing a dramatic scene, you learn how to stay in control. When acting in an intense dramatic play, people feel the need to drain themselves completely during the climactic scene. You do not want to do that. You want to be strong in your characterization, but to do that, you have to maintain control. You must hold something in reserve. Some acting teachers suggest that you give it 90% and hold 10% back. In fact, your audience will think you're acting with complete abandon when you are really in complete control. Try not to turn on the waterworks or actually start crying. You want to pretend to be crying, but you don't want to actually cry. Many young actors feel they must work themselves up to tears to get the audience to feel the emotion of a scene. But you know how sometimes when you're about to cry, but you don't want somebody to see you crying, you're trying to hold it back, and there's that struggle within you to hold those tears back. That actually carries more power and force with your audience than actually turning on the tears. So that's just something to keep in mind. All right, and I believe that's where we are going to stop for today. If you have any questions, let me know. Have a good day.